You are live.
Great. I'd like to call the emergency board meeting to order. We'll take up agenda item number 1, the mobile home condemnation project, and I'd like to invite Doug Farnham and Alex Farrell to testify. Are they on?
Yes, Governor.
Good morning, Governor.
All right, Governor, if it's okay with you, I would start out and then hand it over to Alex. Douglas Farnham, the Chief Recovery Officer for the state. The proposed motion creates a source of compensation, $1.5 million for owners of condemned mobile homes. And the transfer is coming from the renter rebate program or renter credit program. I apologize. There was a name change there and I lost track of it. But the what I'm prepared to speak to today is the reason that there is a surplus in that fund, primarily due to over the last 2 years, the Emergency Rental Assistance Fund, which was funded by a grant from U.S. Treasury, distributed, generally speaking, about $80 million a year in direct rental assistance to the same population that the renter credit program is designed to serve. So understandably, the claims, the amount of credit claimed was lower for the last several years than projected because the amount of rent paid by that population was significantly lower. So the excess funds that would be transferred in this instance do not affect anyone's benefits. The renter credits, I believe, have been paid out in full, and the 1.5 million does not even consume the entire amount of surplus in the renter credit program. So I do think there's no risk to the program, and there's also the fact that this population that is being served by this more focused program, the Deputy Commissioner Farrell will be able to speak to. There's a strong overlap in the population between what the purpose of the renter credit program and the intent and purpose of these compensation payments for mobile home owners. So I'd like to pause there and see if the emergency board members have any questions about the source of funds for this transfer.
Hearing none at this point in time, we'll move on to Alex Farrell.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Alex Farrell, Deputy Commissioner, Housing and Community Development. So the actual program design is based on a gap that we identified in the award process from FEMA. So these are households that have been condemned as a result of the flooding. We had expedited the condemnation process following Irene because it had been our understanding that households, particularly those in mobile home parks that were condemned, totally destroyed, would receive the maximum FEMA award. FEMA changed the process, and now it seems as though they only offer awards up to the amount that they believe would be needed to repair these units. That's falling for almost all of these households far short of the maximum $41,000 award. And so folks are being left in the lurch. And so these funds would be used specifically for, there was a total of 47 resident owned homes on rented lots in mobile home parks. For these folks whose homes were condemned, this funding would help close that gap to get them essentially up to that $41,000 threshold. But it would be structured as compensation for state taking of a condemned home. The reason for that structure is to ensure that this does not turn into taxable income and thus possibly adversely affect the benefits of this population. This is also, we think, logically sounder way to compensate these folks for the fact that their home was deemed condemned and not repairable by the state. What would be subtracted from that award? So it would be $41,000 is where we start. We would subtract out any award they did receive from FEMA. we would subtract the any insurance payment they received. And then we would also deduct, if they sold their home already, which a handful of them did, we would just deduct the sales price. And then the award would be the difference there. On top of this, though not funded with this source, but it is a connected effort, is the removal. So as a part of this, folks will sign off when they're ready and transfer ownership to us. And the state will, at no cost to them, remove and dispose of their home so that that's not coming out of the award that they get from us or from FEMA. I want to pause there to see if there's any questions on what I've said so far. Okay.
I do have a question. Who would buy a condemned mobile home?
In this case, it's unlikely that, oh, I'm sorry, who bought these? So there is an individual who owns, he owns, I'd say, a dealership of sorts. His name is Mike Billadu, who bought a number of these homes. And I think Senator Kitchell, what he does is he takes parts from these and uses them for other homes that he might sell. Perhaps he can find ways to restore some, though we find that to require extensive work. So we don't think it's an option for the homeowners themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. So that's the program structure. We have another set of mechanics that are worked out to ensure that it's properly filed with the town, and that if there's any complications with outstanding, say, property taxes, we will only proceed in an order such that those things are sorted out and we don't leave anybody, either the town or the homeowner, without ability to proceed, say, if they're waiting on tax abatement. So, and another item that folks could be waiting on is, say, an SBA loan. So we're ensuring that folks understand they can wait until they've received all the other assistance they're going to get. Once they're ready, then they sign it over to us. We take ownership. One of the benefits of that structure, of us essentially taking ownership of these units and then disposing of them, is any future lot rent that could be accrued. As soon as we take ownership, the individual is not responsible for that. So ideally, some of these folks, we may be able to get them out of having to pay October lot rent if we can get some folks signed on in time. So that is a timeline we're looking at, though that may not work for everybody.
So may I ask a question on that?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So Alex, who at that point would be paying for the lot rent, or whose responsibility, or what happens at that point?
So theoretically, the state would be responsible for it, though we have discussed this with the owner. We don't think there would actually have to be any payment from the state for that lot rent, in part because we'd be getting rid of the unit and the debris, which is a pretty large concern of the park owners. If we're taking that on, getting that cleared out, that is actually quite a big help to the park owner.
Governor, I have a question of Alex. We know that many of the mobile home parks around the state are actually in flood prone areas. And so when you're talking about these are owners, would the units go back? Is there something to protect? In other words, are we simply supporting the replacement of homes in a flood prone area? I know that there's been some discussion and that isn't supposed to happen. So could you just refresh my memory, maybe others, in terms of how you're guarding against that?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to approach that. So firstly, I have no way to make this determination. This is a town discussion, but the one thing I will say is that River Run is probably a park that is unlikely to come back online, nor do I think it ought to. And I can say, based on the community meeting that we had with the Berlin residents, I don't see anyone going back to that park anyway. And one of the reasons we structured the payment, this compensation in the way that we did, is to provide maximum flexibility. So it doesn't force these people into repair of their unit. It doesn't force them necessarily even into replacing their unit. And now that they no longer are tied to that lot because their unit will be gone, they have maximum flexibility to move. And I can say after talking to a good chunk of these residents, they do not have any interest in going back to any park in the floodplain, particularly the River Run Park. Now, the Berlin Mobile Home Park, there conversations have already started about how to mitigate if that were to open again, what would have to be done. And CRO Farnham may have details on that, but I think that's going to be a longer term conversation anyway. I'll also note park owners are eligible for buyout, while the residents aren't because they don't own the land. Park owners are. So it's another avenue.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Senator Kitchell, if I could just add a couple of things to that. The units, the temporary units that would come into play from FEMA, you can't put them in a floodway. So they wouldn't be able to go into that area. That's why we're having the discussion with the city of Montpelier about the so-called country club area where they could be placed. But this is an area of contention with the park, as Alex had mentioned, in Berlin behind CVS. It was a nice park before, one of the better kept parks in the state, but it is a flood prone area. But it is going to be up to the town with their flood mitigation officer to determine whether they can elevate the home in the future to get to a certain 100-year flood or whatever it is. But that is something that they'll have to work on, and I'm sure the legislature will be getting involved as well in January. Anything you want to add to that, Doug?
I think Doug left.
Okay, then he has nothing to add.
Right.
Senator Cummings.
Or if he does, it's. Go ahead.
No, I had nothing.
That was me, Governor, that was Diane here. I just wanted to follow up on the, Alex, the question or the statement you made that the park owners can access buyout. That's through FEMA or?
That is through FEMA.
Yeah.
So that would be through FEMA. So I'm just, I know we're a couple of steps out there, but so if the River Run Park is not going to be coming back and we're basically doing right by, people can move on, the state now is going to own this property within the park.
Yeah.
I don't know the. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Governor.
Oh, go ahead. We wouldn't own the property, so to speak.
Just the
but
lot.
They would not be able to build on that if they accepted the buyout. They accept the fact that it would not be developed in the future.
Right.
Okay.
It also will be, and you'll hear this in your committee, I think, in January. But we're having discussions about what to do with Central Garage, which is right there,
Right.
right across the river from it. So we may decide not to rebuild there either. So we'll have this broader discussion, which might help in terms of water storage and capacity and prevent flooding in Montpelier in the future.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
So would you like a motion?
Would love a motion.
Okay. So I will read the motion that we have before us, and it's in recognition of the July 2023 flood disaster is declared in Executive Order number 323, and the need to provide assistance to households whose manufactured home on rented lots in mobile home parks has been condemned by the state of Vermont. A motion is made pursuant to 32 VSA sections 133B and 706 to transfer up to 1.5 million of the funds appropriated in the 2022 Acts and Resolve number 185, section B 138 to the Department of Housing and Community Development for compensation of owners who have suffered a total loss of their primary residence as described in the program design in the attached materials.
Second.
Is there further discussion? Sorry. Yes, thanks. There was a second by Senator Cummings. Is there further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and you've approved agenda item number 1. We'll now move on to agenda item number 2, the revision to Business Emergency Gap Assistance Program. I'd like to invite Secretary Curley to testify.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
As you know, I sat in front of you at the July e-board meeting asking for your support in transferring $20 million from the Public Service Department to the Agency of Commerce and Community Development so that we could support businesses affected by the July 2023 flood disaster. You unanimously supported that request, and our team immediately began developing guidelines and deploying grants through what we are calling the Business Emergency Gap Assistance Program, or BGAP. When this program launched, less than a month after the floods, we wanted to cast a really wide net to make sure that nobody was left behind, which is why caps were put in place. We were unsure what the need was or would be, and we knew that we had limited funding to address the need. Now that we've seen the applications and what is being reported, the need is certainly great. Physical damages that are being reported to us have topped $145 million, and more than 600 businesses and landlords and farms have applied for the program. We've been assessing the need, and we feel that a shift in the program at this point will deliver more value to the businesses who need it. And we're working and who are working really hard to get back on their feet and to open their doors, get their apartment buildings open so folks can get back into their homes. So what we're proposing, you have a one-pager, but really there's just one section that I would bring your attention to, the middle section where the grant amount is. And for applicants who have $1 million or less in net uncovered damages, we're proposing to raise the payment of the net uncovered damages from 20% to 30% and remove the cap of $20,000. And under the next bullet, for applicants who have a net uncovered damage of more than $1 million, we would keep that at the lesser of 20%. The net uncovered damages would be $500,000, but we would be removing the FTE requirements and also removing the only one enhanced award. So previously, if you hit that threshold and you had multiple properties, you still were only eligible for one award. And so now that would be removed. And so similar to the other grant criteria for the lower bucket, you could receive an award for up to 3 of your properties. So as I mentioned, you have that revised one pager in front of you. And what I'm here to ask is for your consideration to amend the Business Emergency Gap Assistance Program created at that July 31 emergency board meeting by increasing the maximum grant amount for most applicants as described in the updated program design and the attached materials.
Questions? Rep. Lanfair.
Thank you. Thank you. Lizzie, thank you for bringing in. I'm glad that we have this opportunity at this emergency board meeting to actually consider this upgrade. I'm just wondering because now that you've seen and the amount that we had reserved for this was 20 million, and you can take a look at the applicants now. Will this new structure be totally disperse of all 20 million, do you feel?
Yes, we tried to hit this so that it wouldn't go over and it would still allow us to cover the admin costs. We had to, build a program to deploy this and cover some, as I mentioned, some admin costs. And so our aim here is to hit this as close as we can. We don't want to go over, certainly. We also do expect that there will be a few folks that upon seeing this will potentially apply at this point because they'll realize that they can have a better chance at recovery with a more impactful amount. So we've tried to gauge this as best we can without going over.
Thank you.
Senator Kitchell.
Yeah, after our July meeting, when we approved this, there was some press coverage and people expressed concern about the money being moved from broadband. And it was down in the article and made it clear that the intent was this was advancing it out of that appropriation, and the money would obviously be replaced in the BAA. I just want, I think, just to put that out there and on record, I know that your administration is will work hard to fulfill that. I just wondered if there's any indication that or any concern that people might have or no basis for it, that the necessary match for our broadband grants will be available.
Yeah, we have made that very clear to the director of the broadband board, and we have every intention of backfilling that, and with your help. In fact, they aren't going to need this match, I don't believe, for another year. So I think we're on solid ground there. There's no need that they don't. It's just sitting there, and we have every intention of putting it back into place. Anything you want to add to that, Kristen?
Just that we have identified a carry forward funding source that we'll be bringing forward in the BAA.
Thank you. And the only reason I raise it is simply because that was something that got focused on after our last meeting. And I think it's important that we sort of have on the record that public assurance that this is a matter of advancing money to meet a need, and with the commitment and the plan to simply replace it once we do the BAA. So that's my only reason for raising it. And I'm sure you read the same article.
I did. Yeah, I think I just don't think it was communicated to the board itself. The director was apprised to all of this information and was okay with it, but I don't know as it was communicated to the board itself. And I think it was board members that saw it and were apprehensive. So hopefully we've alleviated their fears.
Well, that's good. Thank you.
Any further questions? Entertain a motion.
Why don't I make this said motion?
Sure.
On agenda item 2 is in consideration of the July 2023 flood disaster in Vermont and the continued urgent needs of Vermont businesses and nonprofits, a motion is made to amend the Business Emergency Gap Assistance Program, BGAP, created at the July 31st, 2023 Emergency Board meeting by increasing the maximum grant amount for most applicants as described in the updated program design in the attached materials.
Second.
Second. Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. The ayes have it, and you have approved agenda item number 2. There is no other agenda items to go through. I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll
All those
second.
in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you very much. The meeting is now adjourned.